I wasn't supposed to be there that day. I'd only stopped by the corner store for a bottle of water, but I saw her, standing by the back of her car, one arm hooked around a paper bag, the other fumbling for her keys. The afternoon light caught the strands of hair that had slipped loose from her bun. She looked distracted, like her mind was still somewhere else entirely. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before, always walking alone, always polite but distant. "You need a hand with those?" I heard myself say before I even decided to. She turned, and there it was, eyes that lingered on me a second longer than strangers usually do. "If you don't mind," she said, her voice carrying that softness that makes you lean in without realizing it. I grabbed the heavier bags, feeling the weight shift against my palms. It wasn't the groceries that made my heart beat faster, it was how close she walked beside me. The smell of her shampoo, faint and warm. The way she glanced at me, quick, as if checking I was still there. Her house was just 2 blocks down. I'd passed it 100 times but never noticed the little details, the chipped blue paint on the gate, the wind chimes made of seashells swaying above the porch. We set the bags down on her kitchen counter. She thanked me, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My eyes caught on her hands, slim, with faint lines that told me she'd done more living than me. "You're sweating," she said, reaching for a glass. She filled it with water and slid it across the counter. Our fingers brushed. Just lightly. I should have left then. Said goodbye, walked out, gone back to my day. But she lingered, leaning on the counter like she wasn't ready for me to go either. "You're not in a rush, are you?" she asked. "Not really," I said, though I probably had a dozen things to do. She hesitated, like she was weighing something in her mind. Then she smiled, small, almost cautious. "Let's take a walk." I don't know why those words hit the way they did. It wasn't just a walk. It was an opening. An invitation. Outside, the air was still warm, the light beginning to shift toward gold. She walked with a slow, measured pace, like she knew how to make a moment last. Our arms didn't touch, but every time she looked over her shoulder to say something, I felt the space between us pull tighter. She asked about my work. My family. The kinds of questions people don't usually ask unless they actually want to hear the answer. I kept my replies short at first, some part of me didn't want to give too much away too soon. At the corner, we stopped. She tilted her head, looking at me like she was deciding something again. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something she wasn't sure she should. Then her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. She tucked the phone back into her pocket without replying. We kept walking, but the silence felt different now, thicker, heavier, like something unspoken had settled between us. When we reached her gate again, she rested her hand on it but didn't open it right away. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "Come by tomorrow," she said quietly, almost like a challenge. Before I could answer, she stepped inside, the gate clicking shut behind her. And I stood there, my pulse still uneven, wondering why it suddenly felt like tomorrow was going to matter more than today ever could. I told myself I was only going to drop by for a few minutes. Just to be polite. Just because she'd asked. Her front door was open when I got there the next afternoon, the screen door keeping the warm air out. She was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, slicing vegetables like she'd been expecting me all along. "You came," she said without looking up. "You told me to. That doesn't always mean people listen." She smiled at the cutting board, like the words meant more than they should. I leaned against the counter, watching the rhythm of her hands. She was deliberate in everything, each slice neat, each movement measured. My exes had been my age or close to it, they rushed everything. She didn't. There was a framed photo on the counter, her with a man I didn't recognize. He looked older than her, serious, arm wrapped around her like she was something to guard. The frame had dust on it. I glanced toward it. Your husband. She didn't stop cutting, but her eyes flicked up. Was. A long time ago. She slid the last of the carrots into a bowl. We're not going to talk about that. The way she said it told me she'd already thought about it more than she wanted to. We ended up in her small backyard, 2 mugs of coffee between us. She asked about my work again, about the job I'd taken after dropping out of school. I told her pieces, leaving out the parts one wasn't proud of. She didn't press. Her turn came slower. I have a son, she said finally, eyes on the grass. He's around your age. It landed between us like a stone in water. The ripples changed everything. I tried to picture him, wondered if we'd ever crossed paths. And then I wondered what he'd think if he saw me sitting here, in his mother's yard, with her looking at me like this. She must have read something in my face, because she added, that's why you and I. She stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. We both knew what she meant. And we both knew neither of us was walking away. A breeze moved between us, carrying the scent of her coffee and the faintest trace of her perfume. She reached up to tuck her hair behind her ear, and her wrist brushed my knee, light, almost nothing, but enough to make my chest tighten. Her eyes flicked to mine, just for a beat too long. There was no smile this time. Just that quiet acknowledgement of something we weren't supposed to admit. She took a slow sip from her mug, then set it down. Do you ever feel like some people only show up in your life at the wrong time? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, the way her hands rested still now, the faint crease between her brows. Maybe, I said finally. Or maybe they show up when you need them, and you just don't realize it yet. Her lips parted like she might reply, but she didn't. She just kept looking at me, and neither of us moved. It was almost dark when I knocked. I hadn't planned to come by, honestly, I'd told myself I wouldn't. But the day had been too quiet, and I kept catching myself looking toward her street. She opened the door fast, like she'd been expecting someone. But her smile faltered the moment she saw me. You shouldn't, she began, but then she glanced over her shoulder. Come in. Quick. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the second pair of shoes by the door. Men's shoes. There was a voice in the kitchen, low, male. Then footsteps. A man appeared in the doorway, older, gray at the temples, wearing the kind of clothes you don't just throw on to relax at home. His eyes flicked over me in one quick scan. Friend of yours? Before I could answer, she said, neighbor. He helped me with the groceries the other day. It was said too casually, like she'd practiced the line. The man nodded politely, but I could feel him assessing me. Nice of you. He didn't stick around, just disappeared back into the kitchen. But the air didn't ease. That's Mark, she said quietly. We used to. She stopped herself, shaking her head. It's complicated. I could feel the warning in her tone. Still, I didn't move toward the door. We stood there in the narrow hallway, barely a foot apart. I could hear the faint clink of dishes in the kitchen. Her hand lifted, like she was going to touch my arm, but she let it drop before it got there. You should go, she whispered, eyes flicking toward the sound of footsteps again. I should have. But instead, I leaned closer. Do you want me to? Her breath caught, just barely audible. She looked at me for a long, loaded second, then stepped back. I left, the night air colder than I remembered it being. I was halfway down the block when I heard her voice behind me. Wait. She'd come out without a coat, arms folded against the chill. She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped closer, her voice low. "He's staying for a few days." "You should probably not, I get it," I said. But my chest was tight, and not from the cold. We stood there, too close for anyone passing by not to notice. I could see the soft light from her porch catching on her hair. My hand almost moved, but I stopped it at the last second. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I thought she might close the space herself. But instead, she pressed her lips together, like holding something back was taking all her strength. "You shouldn't make this harder," she said. "Too late," I replied, and I meant it. Then she stepped back toward the gate, her hand lingering on it, not looking at me when she said, "Tomorrow. Same time." And just like that, I was hooked deeper than I'd ever planned to be. The next evening, I didn't even try to talk myself out of going. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the streetlights flickered like they were nervous too. When she opened the door, her hair was down, loose waves falling over her shoulders. She looked like she'd been pacing. "Mark's gone," she said before I could ask. That should have made things easier. It didn't. We ended up in her living room, sitting across from each other, a half-empty glass of wine between us. She was talking about something, work, maybe, but I wasn't hearing the words. I was watching her hands, the way her fingers kept tracing the rim of her glass. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked suddenly. I almost laughed, but it came out quieter than I meant. "Because I can't stop." She froze, eyes holding mine for a beat too long, then looked away. "You're not supposed to say things like that." "Why not?" "You know why." Her voice was sharper now, but it didn't push me back. If anything, it pulled me forward. "Because of your son? Because of what people might think? Or because you feel the same and you don't want to?" Her breath hitched. She set her glass down harder than she meant to. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't?" She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. I leaned in, my voice low. "Don't what?" Her fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. "Don't make me say it." The room felt too warm. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I could see it, her shoulders tense, her jaw set, like she was holding something dangerous in her mouth and refusing to let it slip. Then she stood abruptly and crossed to the window, her back to me. Rain had started, tapping against the glass. "You're young," she said, her voice quieter now. "You still have time to find someone else. Someone who doesn't come with all the weight I do." I rose and took a step toward her. "But I'm here." She turned then, fast, eyes sharp with something between anger and want. "And I'm telling you," her voice broke slightly. "I'm telling you, if you don't leave right now, I'm not going to stop this." The space between us was electric. I could feel the decision hovering, fragile and enormous. My hand twitched at my side, wanting to close it, wanting to bridge the inches between us. Her breathing was uneven. Mine matched it. Outside, the rain got louder, like it was daring us. She took a half step toward me. That was all. But it was enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. And then, the sound of her phone rang sharp in the air, cutting through everything. She didn't move to answer it. Neither did I. We just stood there, the sound filling the room, and I knew, when it stopped, something irreversible was going to happen. The phone finally stopped ringing. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound had been. She moved first, stepping past me, picking up the glass of wine she'd left on the table. But she didn't drink it. "You should go," she said, without looking at me. I stayed where I was. "Tell me why." Her shoulders tensed, and for a moment I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she turned, and the look in her eyes was sharper than I'd ever seen it. "My son's coming home," she said flatly. I blinked. "Tonight?" She nodded. "Earlier than I thought. He called while you were on your way here." The words took a moment to settle. I'd imagined this conversation in 100 different ways, but not like this, sudden, blunt, without any room to prepare. "You're afraid of him knowing," I said. "I'm afraid of what it'll do to you," she shot back. We stared at each other, the air thick. And then she said it, the thing she'd been holding back. "He knows you." My stomach dropped. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like even the rain might overhear. "You played basketball together in high school. You were at our house once, years ago." I didn't remember until he said your name. I searched her face, but there was no sign of a joke. Just that raw, unflinching honesty. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because I didn't know until today. And because," she trailed off, her hands curling into fists. "Because if I said it, it would make this real. Too real." I didn't know whether to laugh or swear. The ground between us had just shifted, and I could feel it tilting under my feet. She turned away, bracing herself against the edge of the table. "He'll be here any minute. You should leave now." Before, there was a sound from the front gate. A voice calling her name. Her head snapped up. I felt my pulse spike. She looked at me, eyes wide, and in that split second, we both knew, this was the last moment we had alone before everything changed. "I don't care who knows," I said, my voice low but steady. Her breath caught. "You should." Footsteps on the porch. A knock at the door. She closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them again, something fierce behind them. "If you stay, there's no taking it back." The knock came again, louder this time. I didn't move. Her hand hovered near mine, just for a heartbeat, not quite touching. And then, the doorknob turned. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air still carried that damp, heavy quiet. I hadn't planned to come over. Part of me thought maybe I should give her space, let her talk to her son, let the dust settle. But my feet carried me to her gate anyway. She was outside, sitting on the porch steps, a mug cupped in both hands. Her hair was still a little messy from sleep, and she didn't look surprised to see me. "He's gone," she said softly, before I could ask. "Gone?" She nodded. "Took his things last night. Said he needed time. I told him to take all the time he wants." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion in it. I sat beside her. For a while, we didn't talk. The neighborhood was just waking up, someone's radio playing faintly in the distance, the smell of bread baking from a few streets over. "You okay?" I asked finally. She let out a slow breath. "I don't know yet. But I'm not sorry." She glanced at me. "Are you?" I thought about all the things that had happened, the glances, the hesitations, the risks. "No," I said. "Not even a little." Something in her shoulders loosened at that. She took a sip of coffee, then passed the mug to me without asking if I wanted it. "What happens now?" I asked after a moment. Her lips curved, faint but real. "We live with it. We deal with the hard parts when they come. And we don't pretend it's anything less than what it is. It wasn't a grand plan. It wasn't a promise of happily ever after. But it was real, and I realized I didn't want more than that." She leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "when you first carried those groceries in, I didn't think you'd be the kind of person who could turn my life upside down." "Yeah," I said with a small laugh. I didn't think I'd be the kind of person who'd want to. We stayed like that, the morning light warming the porch, our breaths slow and even. The world didn't suddenly make sense. But she was there, and I was there, and for now, that was enough. Eventually, she stood, holding out her hand. "Come on. Walk with me." The same words that started everything. I took her hand, feeling her fingers tighten just a little more than necessary. And as we stepped out into the street, I realized the risk hadn't disappeared, it never would. But neither had the pull between us. And maybe, that was the point.